Remember, gamers, this is simplyTravis with a side quest that is out of this world. I've recently woken up from a cryogenic catnap to some sciency dude yelling at me that I'm going to help him wake up, well, my popsicle buddies who are also frozen, and take on the Halcyon board. He shot me out of my escape pod to meet up with some dude that didn't move out of the way, so now he's a little extra squishy, and well, I'm kind of a little extra lost, trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do now in the Outer Worlds. Today, I'll break down how the Outer Worlds plays. I'll give a smattering of insight into the storyline, break down the art styles used as inspiration for the game, and compare this game to its open world spiritual predecessor, Fallout New Vegas. At the end of the show, I'll determine if this game lives up to the insane amounts of hype that I've personally built upon the game, but also, longtime fans of Fallout and the company Obsidian Entertainment. Now that we've got the intro out of the way, let's grab the nearest power hammer and smash the powers that can be. Cue the music, Rowdy. Alright, so if you've followed the show before, you know that I've been insanely, absolutely hyped beyond any measurable reason for the Outer Worlds. Now, before we get started and I kind of talk about and break down the show, or break down the game, let's talk about what the Outer Worlds is. It is not the Outer Wilds. Get that out of your head. The Outer Wilds was a Groundhog's Day game, which means that it just kind of repeated over and over. It was space adventure. It was fun. You went to new planets and stuff, but it's cool and great if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not really into the whole let's play a game over and over and over again until you get it done. It's not my thing. And it's nowhere near as like a true epic as the Outer Worlds is. So we'll kind of start and talk about, first of all, what is the Outer Worlds? So Outer Worlds was made by Obsidian Entertainment, the team that made the infamous game Fallout New Vegas. Now, if you're a fan of the Fallout series, and I'm not talking Fallout 76, that doesn't count. You don't bring that garbage into this house. Okay, we're going to leave this out of here. Okay, pre-Fallout 76, if you're a fan of any of those games, there were a couple of different ones. You had the original Fallouts, 1 and 2, and I think there was Survival. And there were, those are isometric games that were real survival-based games that were awesome. They were great Fallout games. But then they made Fallout 3. Fallout 3 was the sort of beginning of this sort of 3D survival game that the Fallout series really took to a whole new level. It's kind of like a science fiction. I mean, if you know what Fallout is, you kind of got the idea. The thing was, it was so new at the time and so good, and it was just, you could wander around in the sandbox and really do kind of what you wanted to do. Well, after Fallout 3, they released New Vegas. Now, New Vegas was a little bit different. It was still the sandbox game, but it was definitely more story emphasis. There were more choices in the stories and the dialogue options that were there. Now, after New Vegas, you had like two different camps. You had the camp that was pro like Fallout 3 stylization. Then you had this camp that was more for the New Vegas, like heavy on the dialogue and story stylizations. By the way, I apologize. I've had a cold for the last week or so. So if I have to like take a breath, or maybe I have to get some coffee because my voice is breaking, you're just going to have to deal with that. I hope this is eating up all your earbuds right now. Anyway, I'm trying to give you something to listen to. So, okay, back to what I was saying. So you kind of had these two camps. Well, Fallout 4 came out, and it went in sort of a new direction. It was definitely more, it still had the storylines and had all that stuff, but it felt a lot more like a first-person shooter to some people. than it was necessarily an RPG. And there are people that like that. I think the people that were definitely more for the shooter first aspects of it, probably like Fallout 76. I might get somebody angry by saying that. But 76 loses a lot of its RPG elements. And I'm a huge proponent of the VAT system because, well, I'm playing an RPG. I don't necessarily want to play a shooter. And so this game, Outer Worlds, is still kind of, I mean, it's definitely a shooter, but it feels like an RPG. So at the beginning of this game in the Outer Worlds, so let's actually talk about this game put out by Obsidian Entertainment. So Obsidian was the group that was responsible for Fallout New Vegas. And they are also part of the group that is responsible for my favorite game of all time, Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Um, One aspect I really liked about Deadfire was the writing, the dialogue options, and even the voice acting was spectacular. And a lot of that translates extremely well into this game. So, right at the beginning of this game, you're greeted by a scientist named Phineas. Yeah, it makes me think of Phineas and Ferb. I know people were into that show. And Phineas basically smuggles you out of what's called the Hope. It is this sort of pod that is full of frozen people that were kind of like the smart people, people that had a lot of good things going for them, a lot of good concepts and ideas, and they're hopelessly floating through space. Now, keep in mind, this is not my review of the game. This is my kind of week with the game and what are my thoughts after the first week. I'm a very busy person, so I haven't finished the game. I know some people that have already like knocked out the entire game and really had a good time with it, but really knocked it out quick. All right. So, initial impressions. Phineas is wanted by the Halcyon Holdings Board for high crimes, treason, etc. Pretty much, if you can think of a crime, they're going to say he did it. And you see this throughout the game later on. And honestly, after you meet this guy, some of this may or may not be a little true. He's definitely one of those people that have a concept or goal in mind, science related, and it doesn't matter what happens in the process. Well, after you get sort of shot into space, you land on this planet and you accidentally land on the captain that's supposed to help you. So there's quite a bit of humor in the game. It's some of it's dark humor, some of it not so much. But you go in and you are put on a course to go help out your friends to kind of unfreeze those on the Hope. What's really cool about this game is you have a lot of choice. You can actually, and I haven't done this because right now I'm really playing the game in this almost anarchist style where I'm trying to show freedom and hard work and determination with my choices are what makes things run versus the sort of authoritarian control that these corporations have on these towns through the board, the Halcyon board. But you can actually, didn't realize this, instead of helping Science Dude, you can turn him in, which I find exciting. And this is something that I saw in the Deadfire game to where there are lots of different factions that are at play in this game. You're going to find multiple corporations that are really fighting for power in different areas, and some that are pretty much anti-corporations. Like they're their own sort of entities that aren't in this. I guess the closest thing you can think of is a transnational, multi-global corporation group is what it's trying to be. So you can kind of side with the corpse, you can side against them. So I found that really interesting in this piece or in this game. Next game, I'm actually going to play the exact opposite. I kind of want to be a company man. I want to work for the board with a hammer because it just seems like it's important. Because you can have a giant impact like space hammer, which I find really entertaining. So that goes into the next thing in the game. You have different religions at play. Not only do you have these corporations and factions, you have different religions. You have scientism versus philosophism. And there's some really cool art on the walls in the game that are really propaganda art against both styles that I find interesting. But scientism, or sciencetism, whatever it is the concept that since the Big Bang, that everything was sort of pre-calculated and predetermined as it's coming out. There is absolutely no choice. There is only the plan. And it was put together by the Grand Architect. Kind of some Xenoblade undertones there in my mind. And their idea is that they're trying to adhere as close as possible to the predetermined plan. Now, this is the big religion in the game that is sort of the pro corporation ones, because especially on the planet Terra 2, they don't really like you to go outside of the aptitude test that you've been given as a child. You have to stick with that job, and having anything outside of it is frowned upon. Well, it's a pretty interesting concept. It's completely against what I believe personally, so I haven't really gotten to that one. Whenever I'm the company man, I definitely plan on going for the scientism route. But right now, I'm definitely falling more into the philosophism, which is sort of the antithesis or, counter to scientism. It's absolute and total chaos. Nothing is predetermined. Now, to be honest, I've talked to a lot of scientism and this, don't know how to say it exactly. I haven't talked to a lot of philosophers. I don't know correctly how to say what they are in plural. Philosophs. So I'm about to go to a planet. Won't say which planet, so I don't ruin too much of the story. But I'm about to go to a planet and find that out. What are these people like, and see if they're crazy loons. Because the scientists have been a little bit crazy. So as you're going through this, in general in the storyline, so you have the factions, you have the religions. Well, you also have these really fun cast of characters that seem to fit into the world where you don't. You definitely are kind of the outlier in this entire construct of civilization that's been going on in the Halcyon system. You kind of get also a sense of the epic scale of things, to where things are not really your world anymore. In the game, you're basically, I think it's 70 or 80 years out since you've been frozen, and everything's pretty much changed. Now, there are still some things that stay the same. I mean, all the corporations are basically the same, but they've got much more of a grasp on things than before, and it seems like the world's somewhat in a recession or even going into a depression. So it's really interesting that you come into this game as an outsider, which is kind of relatable if we don't live in that world ourselves. And my favorite part about the story is, without going too much into it, it reminds me of Firefly, but in like all the good ways, especially the support characters. Now, a lot of the support characters are almost like, you can tell they're like, let's go watch some Firefly and we're going to make some characters like it. Okay. You have, let's kind of go through the list. You have a very, I guess, pretty and whimsical, starry-eyed sort of engineer space lady that really just screams like one of the characters out of Firefly. Granted, not as, I guess, cutesy. Then you have a vicar who seems like he's come from the prisons and he's seen some things and he's done some things. That's an interesting character. Now, he definitely seems a little more cutthroat than the priest or the preacher in Firefly. Maybe. If you've watched the Firefly series, the preacher in it's, you kind of learn that he's been through some stuff. He's kind of had a rough time. But the vicar in this show, though, he seems underhanded. And he's a scientismist. So I don't really see him like as a holy figure in my mind. It's this pure logic and reason and predestiny thing that I don't really find as a true religion. So, I don't see that in the game. as being a real vicar, so I could see him being underhanded and shady. You have some other characters that don't really fall in that world, but you do have this sort of new person I just picked up with curly hair, and she is just kind of like a wild space piratey kind of lady. But there are some good characters in the game. The support cast is really fun. Um, I do have a problem with one. There's a robot, and I'll tell you the problem I have with it later when we break down the how the game plays, especially the perks and flaws system. But before we get to there, this game is like a feast for my eyes. As an artist, as an art educator, the style and the work in this game is just spectacular. Now, I am playing on the Xbox One X, so I'm getting to see all these things in 4K. I am not seeing them in HDR, which really kind of, I wish it was in HDR. It's almost like too dark in some areas that I think having that extra range of colors would help. But you get what you get. And it's a beautiful game any other way though, any way you look at it. And most of the artwork in the game tends to fall in line with kind of like a lot of the main styles from the late 19th to early 20th century. So we're talking, let's say 1880s to 1930s, you know. And it makes a lot of sense because a lot of our greatest science fiction uh, books were written in those times. You know, you think of things like War of the Worlds and Time Machine. A lot of good stuff was created in that era. And if you look at the art styles and some of the stuff they use, you know, a lot of stuff we think of like this almost steampunk-esque design. It follows a lot of those styles. So the styles I'm talking about specifically that I see in the game without really have done any research on the game. Now, I did read some interviews right before this, and I'll talk about what the artists say, but right off the bat, in most of the either the propaganda art or the advertisements, I'm seeing an Art Nouveau style. But it's using almost like a color palette that you'd expect to see in a Fauvist art style. So let's break down what I mean by that. When I say the color palette of Fauvism, it's a game that really enjoys this almost pure color in the game. There are a lot of locations and areas that I feel like they really wanted to say like this area will be red and orange, and it didn't matter how realistic, unrealistic it was going to be. They wanted it there because it's a very colorful game. Lots of things pop in this, and they do it in a way that's really intriguing. Um, it's and you know the big thing about the Fauvist and going into the Fauvist style. If you want to look up an artist, it's Matisse, is the big artist of the Fauvist. They thought color first, everything else was secondary. Realism, ideals behind it. You know, the color was supposed to be the thing that shined, and they would use colors around it to emphasize that more. The next thing is the Art Nouveau, which is style that's really the late end of the 19th century, earliest 20th century, that uses a lot of curving, a lot of nature-inspired design. So if you've played the game or you're playing it right now, you'll see a lot of these like vines or things that reference vines and flowery work. It's a very feminine style of art, and it uses a lot of asymmetry, meaning that if you don't know what asymmetry is, it's the exact opposite of symmetrical. It's not even in the middle, it's over to the side. And asymmetry itself, interesting going into the philosophism versus the scientism. Um, Art Nouveau was really an avant-garde or it was an art style that was against this overly historical recording of history in paintings at the time. So it was going back and hearkening to nature opposed to overly scientific pursuits, which fits really well in this game if you think about it. So we're gonna go into what the artists have talked about in an article that I read. They coined the term diesel punk deadwood. And that they said that it incorporates a sort of 1930s to like 1950s cinematic aesthetic. So you're going to see a lot of things too, where you have these almost movie poster designs that take from those kind of 30s eras movies, but like on a poster. And in this game, I see a clash of all these styles at once. It's great. I love it. Now, graphically, I talked about art style. Art style and graphics are different things. Graphically, it's a strong game. It's not like on the level of Gears of War 5. However, I find the art style much stronger in this game. But graphically, it's just nowhere near that kind of caliber. It is better than Fallout 76, though, like miles ahead in my mind. It looks like they're using some effects too. I mean, if you really like to break down the graphics of it, it reminds me a lot of like a souped up Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or Xenoblade Chronicles X engine. Just some of the graphical techniques that they're using in the game, and the motion and the blur, the reflections. It looks a lot like that in my mind. And there's, generally the graphics look good. It's 4K. It's locked at 30 frames per second. I'm not seeing really any slowdown as I've been playing. First person, the characters look good. They interact well. I haven't seen any major glitches, and this is one thing that if you're a Fallout fan, I just want you to go back and think about the beginning of a Fallout release. Yeah, I'm going to take a sip of coffee while y'all think about what people have complained about in Fallout. You're still probably thinking about it. I know whenever I bought Fallout 4, actually somebody purchased Fallout 4 for me as a gift because I'd lent him Fallout 3 years ago. And it was nice of him to just send me I never got it back. It was nice of him to send me a copy of Fallout 4 in the mail one day. But I bought 2 different sets of graphics cards because I had so many problems on my PC before the third set of graphics cards actually kind of worked with it. I never finished Fallout 4. It's a sad, sad story because, well, didn't really work well on PC and I hated it. Now, I mean, Fallout 4 was a good game, but I've actually played it probably more on the X than I have on the PC. It's just not made well for PC. And hopefully those of you that are playing Outer Worlds on PC, you're having a better experience than those of us that played Fallout 4. I'm sure you are, because I have not heard hardly anybody complain about glitches in the game. I've maybe seen like 1 or 2. I did have a weird audio glitch, and that was probably about it. Well, now that I've kind of broken down a little bit of the story without going too far into it, how does it play, the history of it, let's go into, how does this play? Well, it plays a lot like Fallout. I'm not going to lie. There is no more VATS. There is TTD. It's like a temporal time dilation system. Basically, when you're unfrozen and they shot you through space, you have the side effects of being able to slow down time. It's not that simple, though. It does slow down time. But as you shoot a character, depending on where you shoot them, how you shoot them, what you shoot them with, your perks that are in the system, you can have different effects that happens to the character. So if you shoot them in the chest, you would have a different effect that would be whole body, like maybe you catch them on fire, you electrocute them and freeze them. Whereas if you shoot them in the eyes, you might blind them. Shoot them in the knee, you might hobble them. Things like that. Whenever you're in TTD, you have all these cool effects that can happen. I find it really a satisfying system, and I can do really well in like neutralize a couple enemies while I'm in TTD and then send my companions to take them out while I deal with other characters. And really, your companion system is really cool in this game. I've had companions in Fallout that I always hated. I mean, other than the dog. The dog was always cool. You can't say anything bad about him. But in this game, the companions feel like they're worth having around. I like them. And you can actually, there's special moves that are programmed into them. So, like, you do one character will, like, do a flying drop kick. Another will do, like, giant flying hammer. Then I have the priest, and he always has like this dirty, hairy kind of like pose and said, "Let me show you what I learned in prison," and stuff like that. Um, it's interesting. It's fun, and you can really sort of plan the battle beforehand and try to enact your plan. Sometimes it goes to waste, but it's you feel like you have a lot more control in this game with your companions. And what's really cool is like if you're not very strong at like shooting games, you set your companions, you can set all these perks to where your companions can do the work for you. So now and one thing too before we talk about like what the weaponry is and stuff like that, the game is really not open world. And I think that's a point of contention for some people. Now, it's a dense world. There's a lot of cool stuff to do, and the levels are fairly large. You're stuck into different sections on different planets. It's a lot of fun still. And you can loot like crazy. There's still plenty to do. In fact, I'm finding it probably more what's the word? I'm enjoying it. I like it more than some aspects of Fallout 4 where I have to just traverse forever and nothing's happening or there's nothing that exciting. Granted, you do kind of lose that sense of like, oh, this little secret area that nobody really knows about in the game. You know, there is still some of that. Like, if you just set out and wander, you'll find cool stuff. And there are little things hidden, but it's not on the same scale as a Fallout game. And there are little side quests. Actually, there's a lot of side quest stories. And that's probably the thing. I've spent maybe 12 hours into the game so far. And I'm getting to where I think a lot of people got in 6 or 7 hours. Because I'm just having fun doing the side quests. I'm talking to everybody. And man, people can talk in this game. If you like dialogue, this is a game for you. All right, so let's go into, what is your weaponry in this game? Well, I think you have a better melee system in this game than you do with Fallout any day of the week. Plus, you can hit things with a giant space hammer. You can do actually more damage in melee than with a gun. So they do kind of buff it a little bit more. You can sneak up, do extra damage, or just go in like a crazy person and hit everything with your plasma scythe. Can't even talk. Hit everything with your plasma scythe. That's a real weapon if you want to be like a space age reaper, I guess. There's, other things that can like have corrosive damage. There's all sorts of these plasma knives and swords. There's a lot of cool things in melee. Now, there are, of course, tons of guns. There's handguns, shotguns, machine guns, heavy weapons, your general stuff you'd expect. However, and same thing with your melee weapons. Everything can be equipped with modifications. You can change things like add a scope. I mean, can't add a scope to a hammer, but on your guns, you can add a scope. You can change the damage type of any weapon to be like plasma, electricity, N waves, which I still don't even know what those really are. Apparently, it's rare. Corrosive, etc. Something that I've really enjoyed is like taking the sniper rifle and putting electricity on it. So that way, even if you miss, you like stun them for a second and you can get a second shot off and finish it. There's a lot of cool little things you can do with the weapons that gives you some more freedom on how you're going to attack. And fun fact, there are quote unquote science weapons. You do find these specialty weapons in the game. Some are specifically science weapons that you hunt down in a side quest. One in particular is a shrink ray that, it does something that none of the other weapons in the game are going to do. It shrinks the characters and it basically debuffs them. And then you can just pummel them. There's some good science weapons. I won't go into too many of them, but the shrink ray is really fun. And so another thing with the game is whenever you level up in it, it feels like you're being rewarded for your effort. And there's a lot of games that don't really do that. So I'm going to look at this sheet and kind of go into what are the skills that you can get in the game. Okay, you can buff or add points to long guns, heavy weapons, defense, which includes dodge and block, dialogue. You generally have the choices to persuade, lie, or intimidate. Stealth incorporates sneaking, hacking, and lockpicking. I'm not too happy with hacking being under stealth, to be honest, but it is what it is. Tech incorporates medical, science, and engineering. And then the leadership skills, inspiration, and determination. The leadership skills are going to be focused on your companions and also some dialogue choices. And all these honestly can have dialogue choices. If you have like a high medical skill level, you might be able to talk to doctors differently and affect things. Now, as you level these up, and they can go up to a level of 100, there are different skill unlocks. So, for engineering at 20, you can repair weapons in the field. At 40, you can break down the weapons for a 20% chance to get a mod. All the way up to 100% where you do damage against auto mechanicals plus 20%. There's some pretty cool stuff with this system. I've had a lot of fun with it. Right now, I'm focusing on long guns. Oh, by the way, I think there were handguns and melee too that were in there. It's just not on the screen I'm looking at. But I'm focusing on science, long guns, and I believe a combination of inspiration and determination and persuasion. Um, Having a lot of fun with it. I can persuade a lot of people to do what I want, in a good way, in a nice way, without having to knock their heads in. So, Now, that also goes into our next system. There is the perk system and the flaw system. So the perk system is, after you reach a certain level, you can unlock a perk. Now, the perks are actually worth getting. Things might be as simple as on the first tiers as, 5 plus 5 base armor rating. Or you go quicker, or you do better with companions, or you do worse with companions and better by yourself. All the way up to getting more time and the TTD, tactical time dilation. Oh, whoops, I said temporal time dilation earlier. Whatever. All the way up to, your higher tiers where you get much more range attack damage, plasma damage less. One called The Last Stand, plus 30% damage while under 25% health, 20% damage for revenge. A lot of cool stuff that's just a nice little perk system. But then there comes my favorite thing called the flaws system. Now, if you are somebody that likes to role play your character and deal with the, role that has been played upon you, I don't know how you want to say that, this game gets you. I find this probably one of the more interesting things. Now, there are a limit to flaws. You get 3 flaws in normal, 4 in hard, and 5 in supernova difficulty. And they range from a lot of different things. Right now, I actually have robophobia. I just developed robophobia last night because I kept getting attacked by auto mechanicals. So now they scare me, and whenever I'm attacking, I'm not as effective. I get -1 dexterity, -1 perception, and -1 temperament. And it's actually caused some issues with one of my companions, which is a robot. And I actually have the choice whenever I'm talking to him to just go, "Ah!" Which is a great, great choice for a dialogue choice. I'm actually going to get rid of him because you can tell your companions to go away because I want to role play the character to that. Now, there are other ones. You can actually have a permanent concussion from getting hit in the head too many times. Rowdy was telling me he almost had that on his. Uh, Herpetophobia and paranoid, all sorts of interesting things that you can get based on what you've gone through in the game. I find that interesting. Now, whenever you take a flaw, you get an extra perk. So you can decide if you want to play that way. You actually don't have to take flaws, but that's one thing I just found really interesting that I wanted to make in the game. All right, so next thing in the game is, what is the sound and the voice acting like? The voice acting's really good. The characters' emotions are lip synced pretty well, and the emotions match up, or sometimes they don't, with what they're saying. They're not like ultra realistic characters either, by the fact that it's in that what's called the uncanny valley, where characters look a little too close to real, and it makes them kind of creepy. But I generally want to hear what they say because if they're talking sarcastically, they kind of hint it in the face, or characters might be looking around. Um, so I read very fast, and this game I like to take that time and listen to what they say because generally the voice acting's good. Now there are a couple characters that drive me up the wall. There's this one guy that wants to be an engineer in one of these towns, and I couldn't take that very long. Now, let's go on to something that also is not annoying. The music. The music is really good. It's nothing that's gonna be like, you don't have the repeat of songs like you did in Fallout, but as much as like we've talked about our top soundtracks in gaming, I wouldn't say this is probably in the top soundtracks, but it's an extremely appropriate soundtrack. And it has that thing that you would hear in the Firefly game, or sorry, the Firefly movie and shows, where it had that kind of southern twang all of a sudden that reminds you of a western. Um, I really like that about it, and you can tell it's almost like straight up pulled from that. But one thing I'd like not having to hear is Butcher Pete 400 times a day. That got really old really quick. I like most of the Fallout songs, but Butcher Pete drives me bonkers. So voice acting is great. I want to listen to it. Sound in general, the noises that are coming from the characters, they're all really good. In fact, you can listen in the game if you have good surround sound and you kind of tell where the bad guys are and where to stay away from. I've actually used that quite a bit to help me out. So, sounds excellent. And, is this a fun game? Duh. I guess is the way to say it. I'm having a blast with it. I'm 12 hours in, just got to Monarch, which I hear shouldn't take 12 hours, but I've explored every nook and cranny I can, and I'm just having a blast. Um, and I want some more, I guess I really want some more of this game, and I'm hoping there's going to be more planets. So I hear this is a very, I guess, in the scale of RPGs, it's kind of a short game. Most people finish this game between 24 and 30 hours on their first playthrough. And there are some things that you can't unlock. I mean, you can't really play this whole game in one playthrough, not get everything, get the full experience. I'm definitely coming back because I want to work for the board as a company man. I'm curious if other people will want to kind of do those other things too. So hopefully they have DLC in the future. I'd love to see some more planets. I don't know how this game ends, haven't gotten there. What's really cool is it's on PS4, it's on Xbox, it's on PC, and it's coming to the Switch. And there was actually a company that showed their concept of this game. Basically, they got to make the game for the Switch, and Obsidian's super happy with how it's turning out, so it's going to come to the Switch. And random nerd alert, or I guess news alert, let's go into what Rowdy thinks of this game. He's not here. Um, he's not recording with me today, but he just texted me. Let's see. I asked him, "What are your thoughts on Outer Worlds so far?" Gonna read him on the side quest. He says, "I'm struggling to find a vault. I've searched like three planets so far, no vault." So if you played Fallout, you know what he's talking about. And then there's no Johnny guitar. But besides that, I can't put it down. It's the perfect combo of Fallout New Vegas and Firefly. Yes, Rowdy, you are correct. But although it's one of the best games I've played in the last few years, I can't give it a perfect score. It doesn't feel inspired. It's like everything was borrowed from other games and media, but that doesn't make it a bad game, though. And, he's kind of got a point there. I've talked about this whole thing today, like where it's pulling inspiration from. It's a very inspired game. Now, I would kind of disagree that I think that it's its own original thing. I do see that it is pulling stuff from everywhere, but I'm okay with it. Um, so, I'll just leave it at that. I think we will definitely have to discuss the game again after it's finished. So this is my part 1 on the Outer Worlds. So this is the impressions. This is the first week. But I think we're definitely going to have to take another look at it. Take a deep dive into the game once it's done in a side quest and see what we think after we finish the game and maybe after we've done a couple playthroughs. So generally online right now too, the scores on Metacritic are 85. Score an 85 out of 100 and 8.4 for user score. It's generally pretty favorable, especially a game that I think is going to be highly criticized like this one. This is everybody's expecting Fallout New Vegas. Does it live up to that hype? And you know what? It does. In my mind, it is. It is a successor and it's a good game. And there has been hardly anybody as hyped as this game for this game as me, and it lives up to it. All right, guys. So I want to thank y'all for listening in today. I'm Simply Travis with the Lamer Gamers Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Lamer Gamers Cast. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you cast your pods. Share this episode with other people. Let me know what you think, all that good stuff. And if you get bored, you can even check us out over on YouTube. Leave a comment or something like that. So we will have a regular episode coming up in the future. And hopefully we'll record it this weekend. It's Halloween for me today. No trick-or-treaters came and knocked on my door today, which is sad, but nobody ever comes out here. So I decided to record a podcast. So thank you guys again for listening to us. Also, don't forget to check out parallaxmedia.one, who is helping us get this podcast out further. And you guys have a good day.